The hangar held its breath. 18 naval jets, perfect formation. Inspection lights burning white and cold. An admiral stood at the end of the row with a maintenance file in his hands, not the summary, the raw file. His thumb rested on a line of numbers that told a story nobody in the room wanted told. He looked up. The question he asked was quiet, which made it louder than anything else in the building. Who cleared all 18 aircraft? No one moved. 12 technicians along the wall, a CEO in a black coat, a crew with a perfect smile that was working very hard to stay perfect. $1 billion contract 30 minutes from being signed. And somewhere outside, walking away in the gray November morning, a man in a worn jacket with a tool bag in one hand and a small blue notebook tucked under his arm. He did not look back. The hangar was never quiet. People thought it was. Civilians, suits, the kind of people who showed up for ribbon cuttings and quarterly reviews. They walked onto the floor and said things like peaceful and impressive, and what a well-organized facility. They heard silence. They saw stillness. They were wrong. The hangar breathed, it hummed, it ticked and settled and groaned in ways that had nothing to do with the building itself. 18 naval training jets sat in their bays like enormous sleeping animals. Metal cooling after a day of thermal stress. Hydraulic lines holding pressure that always wanted to go somewhere else. The overhead service lamps burned amber instead of white at this hour. Not inspection lights, work lights, the kind that made everything honest. Daniel Marsh walked in through the side personnel door at 8 minutes past 8. Not because he was late, because he stopped in the parking lot for exactly 8 minutes, sitting in his truck with the engine off, listening to the last of the evening settle around him. It was a habit from the ship. Chief Petty Officer Raymond Bowen had started it. Raymond, who had the hands of a sculptor and the patience of geology. Who had told a 23-year-old Daniel Marsh on the deck of USS Harrington. You cannot hear a machine if you walk in full of your own noise. So Daniel emptied himself in the parking lot first, every night. Then he walked in. His tool bag was worn at the shoulder strap where the canvas had been rubbing for 11 years. There was a small Navy stencil near the base so faded it was almost a watermark, almost a ghost, almost nothing. His work jacket was the same one he had worn for the last 6 years at Ashworth Aerospace, faded at the elbows. A small bleach spot near the second button that Grace had caused at age 4 when she got into the cleaning supplies and he had not been fast enough. He had never replaced the jacket because of that spot. He was not entirely sure why. Some things you keep not because they are useful but because they are true. He set his bag down beside the first jet, opened the blue notebook to the current date, wrote the time, wrote nothing else yet. The notebook was not regulation. It was not issued. It was not part of any official Ashworth Aerospace documentation protocol. It was a narrow cloth-bound thing he had bought himself at a drugstore 3 years ago when the first notebook ran out. He was on his 4th now. Every page belonged to a single aircraft. Every line belonged to a single observation. Small observations, the kind that sounded like nothing, the kind that were always something. Paper does not get overwritten. That was what he had told Noah Briley 8 months ago when Noah, 27 years old and sharp in the way young mechanics are sharp, quick, eager, certain had watched Daniel write in the notebook for the first time and asked why he bothered. Why keep a separate record when the official system logged everything? Why duplicate? Daniel had looked at him, then at the notebook, then back at him. Paper does not get overwritten. Noah had not asked again, but he had started watching more closely after that. The morning had started the way every morning started. Before the shift, before the notebook, before the amber lights and the hydraulic hum. The kitchen was small. It was always warm, even in November, because Grace ran hot and had declared at age 6 that the thermostat was set at 68 degrees over her dead body. She was 9 now and she had not changed her position. The thermostat sat at 71. Daniel had long ago accepted this as one of the immovable facts of his life, like the tide and the fact that hydraulic seals never fail at convenient moments. She was eating cereal when he came downstairs, one sneaker already on, one in her hand. She was doing 3 things at once: eating, reading something on her worksheet for school, and conducting what appeared to be a private conversation with herself about something that had happened at recess the previous Friday. Daniel stood in the doorway for a moment and just looked at her. He did that sometimes, just looked. It was not a sad thing, exactly. It was more like the way you look at something you almost lost and then didn't. Careful looking, grateful looking. The kind that leaves a small ache behind it because the gratitude and the fear live in the same place. On the refrigerator, held up by a magnet shaped like a lighthouse they had found at a yard sale 2 summers ago, was a drawing in crayon. Grace had made it when she was 7. A jet sitting on a gray carrier deck, the wings slightly crooked, the wheels optimistic circles, the sky a blue that did not exist in real aviation but was exactly the blue Grace believed the ocean sky should be. Beneath the jet, in the careful uneven letters of a child who has recently learned that permanence matters, "My dad fixes the planes that bring people home." She had never let him take it down. He cut her sandwich diagonally. She had never specified diagonal, but Claire had always cut it diagonally. And Grace, who had been 6 when Claire died and remembered less than she would ever admit, had once asked Daniel very casually, not looking up from her plate, how come some sandwiches taste better than others even when they have the same stuff inside? He had not had an answer. He still cut it diagonally. He wrote the note on a square of paper and tucked it into the side pocket of her lunchbox. "You are brave. I am proud." He had been writing those notes since the month after the funeral, when a school counselor had gently suggested that consistent small things could anchor a child through inconsistent large ones. The counselor had meant for it to last a few months. 3 years later, Daniel was still writing them. He suspected he would be writing them when she was in college. He suspected she would pretend to be embarrassed, and he suspected she would keep every single one. In his inside jacket pocket, where a man might keep a folded photograph or a spare pen, a small length of knitted fabric, charcoal gray, hand-knitted, uneven in places because Claire had learned to knit while he was on deployment and had not fully committed to the skill, only to the gesture. She had given it to him the week before he shipped out for the last time on USS Harrington. She said it was a scarf. He said it was too short to be a scarf. She said fine, it was a reminder then. He said a reminder of what? She said of the fact that someone is waiting, which is really all you ever need to know. He still carried it. Not for warmth. For the reason, she said. By 10:30 that night, the shift had settled into its rhythm. The other technicians were spread through the bay, each working their assigned checks. The overhead hum of the building had dropped a half register as the structure cooled and the heating system cycled down. Daniel moved between the jets the way he always moved, not checking boxes, listening. He stopped at Jet 7. He had walked past it twice already. The first time, nothing. The second time, nothing he could name. Third time, he stopped. Put his gloved hand flat against the fuselage. Not checking anything specific. Just resting it there, the way you rest a hand on a person's shoulder when you are not sure what they need but you know they need something. Raymond Bowen had taught him that, on USS Harrington. In the steam and the noise and the controlled chaos of a carrier deck, Raymond had put Daniel's hand on a jet engine casing and said, "Feel that, Not the vibration, deeper, the intention. A machine always tells you before it fails. It is a matter of whether you are willing to slow down enough to hear it." Daniel stood there with his hand on Jet 7 for 11 seconds. He counted without meaning to. Old habit. Then he opened the blue notebook. He wrote the time. He wrote hydraulic tone on Jet 7. Slight deviation. Approximately half register low. Not alarming. Not nothing. Noah had drifted over by then. He did that, drifted toward whatever Daniel was paying attention to, the way water finds the lowest point. He stood 2 steps back, arms loose at his sides, trying to look like he was just passing through. Something wrong with 7. "Not yet," Daniel said. "That is what I want to check." Noah watched him write. He had been watching Daniel write in that notebook for 8 months, and he still found it slightly mysterious. The official log was right there. The digital system captured every service action, every check, every flag. Everything was time-stamped and backed up and accessible by 6 different people with the right clearance. Why the paper book? Daniel did not answer for a moment. He finished the entry, closed the notebook, looked at the jet. "Paper does not get overwritten," he said. Noah opened his mouth, closed it, filed the sentence somewhere he could think about it later, went back to his station. Daniel stayed with Jet 7. By 2 in the morning, the rest of the shift had moved into the pattern they always moved into, quiet, focused, each person inside the small world of their own task. The building had gone completely still in the way only industrial spaces do in the deep middle of the night. A stillness that was not peaceful. A stillness that was just honest. Daniel had been at the small steel desk in the corner of the bay for 90 minutes. In front of him, printouts, maintenance history for all 18 aircraft in the row. Not the summary reports, the raw files. 740 pages of time-stamped entries. Technician signatures. Parts log. Inspection flags. He read them the way Raymond Bowen had taught him to read a maintenance history. From the beginning. In order, slowly, not looking for anything specific, just reading. Letting the pattern emerge on its own. It emerged on page 114, a small hydraulic irregularity on Jet 4. flagged, then cleared, remarked as within tolerance. He kept reading them. Page 203, Jet 9. Same irregularity, different entry, different date, different technician of record. Flagged, then cleared, same clearance code. Page 371, Jet 14. He sat back. He looked at the 3 entries side by side. Then he went back through the earlier sections and found 2 more. Jet 2, Jet 11, 5 aircraft, same pattern, same hydraulic signature, flagged by 5 different technicians on 5 different dates, cleared by the same approval code every time. That was the part that was wrong, not the irregularity itself. Hydraulic systems had variations, they had tolerances. That was not the problem. The problem was the clearance pattern. Because when Daniel cross-referenced the approval code against the shift schedule, the names that code was tied to had not been on duty on the nights the clearances were entered. Same approval code, different technicians of record. All clearances entered after midnight, all on nights when Robert Calder had signed into the building. Daniel opened the blue notebook to a clean page. He wrote slowly, deliberately, tail numbers, dates, times, the names of the technicians whose credentials had been used, the times the entries had been made. He wrote a formal recommendation, hold Jet 7 or full hydraulic teardown before 600 inspection. He noted the approval code discrepancy across all 5 aircraft. He printed the report, signed it, picked it up, walked toward the stairs. He was not expecting the light in the operations office to be on. The door was half open. A line of warm yellow fell across the landing. Daniel slowed. He was not a person who slowed for doors. But something in him, something trained by years of listening to machines that were about to fail, registered an anomaly. A door open that should not be open. A light on at 2:47 in the morning. He pushed the door the rest of the way. Robert Calder was standing at the window. Charcoal suit, not a wrinkle, not a thread out of place. A coffee cup on the windowsill beside him. Still steaming. Which meant he had not been there long, or someone had brought it to him. And there was no one else in the building at this hour who would be bringing Robert Calder coffee. He had brought it himself, which meant he had been in this building for a while. Which meant he had. Daniel came in. The smile arrived on his face, the way smiles arrive in shareholder photos. Warm from a certain distance, empty at closer range. He said, "You are up late." "I am on shift." "Right, of course." Calder moved away from the window, held out one hand, easy, unhurried. Daniel gave him the report. Calder took it without looking at it, set it on the desk face down. "Tell me what I am holding." A recommendation to pull 1 aircraft from the inspection row, possibly more, pending review. On what basis? Repeated hydraulic irregularity across 5 airframes. Same override code in all 5 clearances. Code belongs to technicians who were not on shift when the entries were made. I am asking for a teardown on Jet 7 before the Admiral walks this floor. Calder picked up the report. Read 3 lines, set it down face down again. Caleb, Daniel. Calder did not react to the correction, just absorbed it. Kept going. "I appreciate the diligence, I genuinely do. But this is the morning of the most significant contract inspection in this company's history. What we need from this floor is confidence." Daniel looked at the report lying face down on the desk. "Confidence is not a maintenance standard." "That is a very good line," Calder said. He almost sounded like he meant it. "The kind of confidence I am talking about is the kind that keeps this contract alive. Which keeps this company alive. Which keeps your position alive. Do you understand what I am saying?" "I understand what you are saying." "Then you understand that what I need from you right now is your signature on the clearance form, all 18. Daniel set his pen on the desk beside the overturned report. The small click it made was very quiet in the office. No, nothing changed in Calder's face. That was the thing about Calder. Nothing ever changed in his face because he had stopped letting his face register things he had not already decided to register. He was a careful man. He was careful in every direction at once. He picked up his phone. He did not step away from Daniel to make the call. He typed slowly, clearly, making sure Daniel could see the screen. Night lead refusing sign-off on inspection clearance. Insubordination. Possible sabotage risk to 600 inspection. Need immediate action. He hit send, looked up. The smile was back, a slightly different version of it. The version with the temperature behind the eyes turned all the way down. "Go home, Daniel. Or wait here for Miss Ashworth. Either way, your night is over." Daniel walked back down to the floor. He did not go home. He sat at the steel desk under the amber lamp. He opened the blue notebook to a clean page. At the top he wrote the date and time. Below it, 1 line. Safety report number 21, blocked by COO till 47 a.m. He put the pen down. He sat there in the amber light with the 18 jets stretching out in front of him in the dark, and he thought about Raymond Bowen, who had taught him to listen. He thought about the 5 clearances with the wrong timestamps and the wrong hands behind them. He thought about the pilots who would climb into these cockpits in 3 hours and 12 minutes. Pilots who did not know his name, who would never know his name, who would adjust their harness and run through their checklist and trust, with the full weight of their lives, that a stranger in a work jacket had done the job the way it needed to be done. He thought about Grace, her shoe swinging under the chair, the crayon wings on the refrigerator, the way she read her worksheet and ate her cereal and talked to herself and did everything at once because she was 9 and 9 was a speed, not an age. The note in the lunchbox, "You are brave, I am proud." He sat with that for a while. He did not know Victoria Ashworth was already in her car. He did not know she had been on a board call until after midnight, and that her phone had buzzed twice after that Preston Vale, both times. The same low, unhurried voice asking whether tomorrow morning would go smoothly, as if smooth was simply a matter of deciding to be. He did not know she had driven past her building, circled the block twice, then turned toward the hangar because standing still had stopped feeling like an option. He did not know any of that. He only knew that Jet 7 was not safe, and that somebody had to be the person who kept saying so. The parking lot lights washed yellow across the tarmac when Victoria Ashworth's car swung in at 5:42. She stepped out in a black coat, hair back, tablet under her arm, the kind of focus that comes not from clarity but from choosing not to let uncertainty be visible. Robert Calder was at the side door. 2 cups of coffee, a folder. He walked beside her and talked quietly and chose every word the way a person chooses which stepping stones to put weight on crossing a stream they are not entirely sure about. A senior technician, Calder said. Long-standing performance issues. A pattern of last-minute reports that serve primarily to slow operations. Tonight, on the morning of the most consequential inspection in company history, he is refusing to sign the clearance forms and has effectively held the floor in limbo. He paused. "I would have handled it. But this needs to come from you. The team needs to see where the line is." Victoria did not answer. She was already walking through the door. The hangar was amber and still. 18 jets in their bays. She registered them the way she registered everything in this building as assets, as schedule items, as entries in a contract. She had been running this company for 4 years. She had inherited it from her grandfather's partner, who had built it from a maintenance shop with 4 employees, and a philosophy she had heard so many times it had stopped sounding like wisdom and started sounding like wallpaper. Never let a pilot fly in something you would not put your own child in. She had believed it. She still believed it. She just had not been in this section of the building in a very long time. The technicians along the wall had gone still when she entered. 12 of them in coveralls, faces she saw at safety briefings twice a year and almost nowhere else. Not one of them met her eyes. A young one, 20-something, coveralls a little too new, was looking at his own hands like he had never seen them before. Daniel Marsh stood up from the steel desk when he saw her coming. He did not straighten his jacket, did not smooth his hair, did not do anything except stand up and face her directly, the way someone stands when they have already worked out what they are prepared to lose and have made peace with the number. "You are Daniel Marsh." "Yes, ma'am." "You have a clearance form you are refusing to sign." "I have a clearance form I am refusing to falsify." A beat, a small one. The kind that registers and then disappears if you are not paying attention. Victoria looked at him. Not the jacket, not the worn tool bag on the floor, not the notebook she could see in his chest pocket. The thing she was looking for was the thing Calder had described. Bitterness, grievance, the specific expression of a person who wants to cause a problem. She was looking for it. She did not find it. What she found was patient. What she found was very tired. What she found was a man who had been awake since yesterday morning, and who was standing in front of her anyway, without drama, without theater, because there was something he needed her to understand, and he had not run out of ways to try to make her understand it. "Mr. Marsh, in approximately 70 minutes, an admiral of the United States Navy will walk this floor. In 3 hours, I sign a contract that represents the largest single acquisition in this company's history. You are asking me to pull an aircraft off the line based on a hydraulic anomaly. I am asking you to pull an aircraft off the line because 5 aircraft share an identical fault pattern that was cleared by a credential that does not match the technicians who were on duty when the clearances were entered." Victoria. Calder had moved forward. His voice had the quality of something very controlled. "This is exactly the behavior pattern I was describing." Victoria did not look at him. She was still looking at Daniel. "Sign the clearance, Mr. Marsh." "No, ma'am, that is a direct instruction from the chief executive of this company. I understand who you are, then sign. No, the word was not loud. It was not angry. It was simply permanent. The way a fact is permanent. The way the failure point of a hydraulic fitting under pressure is permanent regardless of what anyone signs. Victoria's jaw tightened, and in the corner of the room Noah Briley was looking at the floor, and Walt Greer, the senior test pilot, who had come in through the back entrance 20 minutes ago and had not said a word to anyone, was standing near the wall with his arms crossed and his eyes on Victoria Ashworth, with an expression that was not hostile and was not warm and was simply the expression of a man who has been watching something unfold for a long time and is waiting to see if it will turn. One technician, Victoria said, does not get to stop a $1 billion inspection. Daniel reached up, slowly, unclipped his employee badge from the loop on his jacket, set it on the steel desk between them. The sound it made was not loud, but it was the loudest thing in the room. He looked at her, not with anger, not with self-pity, with something that was harder to receive than either of those, because it did not require anything from her, and it was not trying to make her feel bad, and it was simply true the way things that have been earned over a long time and at significant cost are true. Ma'am, he said. Sometimes one mechanic is the last thing standing between a signed contract and a folded flag. Something moved behind Victoria Ashworth's eyes. A shape, a hesitation, a question that did not quite make it into words because Robert Calder was already speaking. Victoria, the Admiral is 20 minutes out. She blinked. The shape closed. Mr. Marsh. You are terminated effective immediately. Security will escort you from the property. Your credentials are void. Daniel nodded once, not in agreement, in acknowledgement. Two different things. He picked up his tool bag. He picked up the blue notebook. He left the badge on the desk where she had watched him place it. He walked past Noah Briley, who was still looking at his own hands. He walked past Walt Greer, who lifted his eyes and held them steady for every step of the way to the door. He did not look at the 18 jets, not one. The personnel door opened, let in a slice of cold November air in the gray pre-dawn dark of Virginia, then closed, in his jacket pocket, folded next to Claire's knitted scarf, a lunchbox note he had not yet given Grace. Whatever today looks like, you are still the best part of it. He would put it in her bag tonight when he picked her up from school. He would not tell her yet that he had lost his job, not until he had figured out how to say it in a way that did not break the drawing on the refrigerator. The one with the crooked wings and the carrier deck and the sentence a 7-year-old had written in careful uneven letters, because she understood, even then, something that a $1 billion contract could not make true and could not make untrue. My dad fixes the planes that bring people home. Behind the closed door, in the hangar that was no longer his, the amber lights burned on. The jets waited, the clock turned over to 6, the Navy arrived exactly on time, which is what the Navy does. 3 black SUVs rolled through the main gate at 6 o'clock precisely. Not 6:01, not 5:59. 6. The kind of punctuality that is not about schedules, the kind that is about discipline. About the belief that if you cannot control when you arrive, you cannot control anything that comes after. Admiral Harold Swan stepped out first. 62 years old, silver at both temples. His coat pressed to a line so sharp it looked like something you could cut yourself on, if you were not careful. He did not look at the building first. He looked at the sky, just for a moment, the way pilots do, old habit, checking conditions before entering any enclosed space. Then he walked in. 2 commanders followed. A civilian technical auditor carrying a hard shell case. They did not smile. They did not make small talk. They moved the way weather moves into a room, not dramatic, just inevitable. Victoria Ashworth met them at the entrance. She had not slept, not really. The board call had gone past midnight. Preston Vale had called twice after that, both times the same unhurried voice, both times the same question dressed in different clothes. Is everything in order? Is the morning settled? Is there anything I should know before we proceed? She had said yes, fine, no, 3 times, and each time she had believed it a little less. But she was here now, shoulders straight, tablet in hand. The Ashworth name on the building behind her, and 4 years of decisions that had led to this morning, and a signature that was supposed to close everything by noon. Robert Calder stood at her shoulder. Preston Vale watched from the far edge of the group, patient the way a chess player is patient. The kind of patient that means he already knew his next 3 moves. Victoria began her briefing. Admiral Swan listened for approximately 45 seconds, then he turned toward the jets. He walked the row in silence, and this was the moment, right here, this was the moment that should have been the end of the story. 18 aircraft in perfect formation. Canopies polished, landing gear locked, everything where it was supposed to be. The kind of mourning that gets written up in trade publications and mentioned in shareholder letters. The kind that becomes a photograph on a lobby wall. Except Admiral Harold Swan had been flying off carrier decks since before Victoria Ashworth was born. And he had not gotten to 62 years old and 4 stars on his shoulder by looking at the surface of things. He stopped at Jet 3, ran one gloved finger along a hydraulic coupling. Slowly, didn't speak, moved on, stopped at Jet 9, crouched, looked at the undercarriage from an angle no one had looked at this morning, rose, didn't speak, stopped at Jet 14, one hand flat against the fuselage. Not grabbing, not pressing, just resting, the way you rest a hand on something you are trying to hear. He stayed there for almost a full minute. Victoria watched him. Something cold was beginning at the back of her neck. Small, not alarming, just present. The way a sound that half a register off is present before you can name what is wrong with it. Swan moved to Jet 7. He stopped. He looked at the aircraft for a long time without touching it. Then he set his hand flat against the fuselage. The same position, the same pressure, the same stillness. Victoria thought, without knowing why she thought it, someone else stood here like that. Bring me the raw maintenance file, Swan said. Not the summary, the raw. The auditor opened the hardshell case, brought up the files on the tablet, handed it to Swan. Swan read. His face did not change, which was somehow worse than if it had. He read for 3 minutes. 4. The hangar had gone completely silent except for the low hum of the building itself. 12 technicians stood along the wall, not moving, barely breathing. Noah Briley was looking at his own hands again. Walt Greer was leaning against the wall near the pilot's entrance with his arms crossed and his eyes on Swan and the expression of a man who has been waiting for something to arrive and is not surprised to see it. Miss Ashworth. Yes, Admiral. These aircraft were not merely serviced. He did not look up from the tablet. They were understood. Someone located faults that were not flagged in the primary inspection cycle. Someone retorqued fittings that were not on the scheduled maintenance list. Someone identified a hydraulic deviation on Jet 7 that would have failed a pressure test within 72 hours. He looked up. That is not committee work. That is one pair of hands. So I am going to ask you a straightforward question. And I would appreciate a straightforward answer. Who cleared all 18 aircraft? Calder moved forward. Admiral, our operations team runs a shared clearance process across all shifts. This is the result of that collective. Swan looked at him. Just looked. The kind of look that does not need words because the words would be redundant. The kind that says, I have been dealing with men like you for 40 years, and I am too old and too tired and too experienced to pretend I don't know exactly what you are doing. I did not ask about a collective. His voice was quiet, mild almost. I asked who cleared these aircraft. Silent. Swan turned to the technicians along the wall. Someone in this hangar knows. I would prefer to hear it from a person rather than spend the next several days extracting it through channels that are unpleasant for everyone. Noah Briley felt his mouth go dry. He looked at Calder. Calder was looking at the floor beside his own left foot with a careful emptiness that was somehow worse than any expression. He looked at Walt. Walt was not looking at him. Walt was looking at the steel desk in the corner of the bay, the one under the amber lamp, the one with a badge lying on it. Face up, Noah's throat tightened, because someone had to. Because the alternative was standing here in the silence while 40 years in the United States Navy waited for an answer that everyone in this room already knew. It is a night lead code, sir. His voice cracked on the second word. He cleared it. The code. In the maintenance file. It belongs to Daniel Marsh. Victoria's head turned. Slowly. Who? Noah opened his mouth, started again. The technician, ma'am. The one who was terminated this morning. The auditor was still scrolling, going deeper into the file. The code appeared again and again, 18 times. Beside it, on entry after entry, notes in a careful blocky handwriting. Notes that had been transferred into the official log and then on a parallel layer edited down, softened, or removed entirely. The raw file remembered what the clean file had been told to forget. Someone altered these entries, Swan said. It was not a question. Calder stepped forward. Admiral, I can walk you through our internal reconciliation process. There are standard reasons why entries are reviewed and updated after initial submission, Mr. Calder. Swan's voice had not risen. It had done the opposite of rising. It had gotten very quiet in the way that certain things get very quiet right before they become very final. If you speak again before I ask you a direct question, I will conduct the remainder of this inspection through your legal department. Calder closed his mouth. Walt Greer pushed off the wall. He walked out from near the pilot's entrance, 61 years old. Work boots that had seen 4 decades of flight lines. He moved with the unhurried weight of a man who has decided something and is done with the deciding. He stopped in front of Victoria Ashworth. He did not look at Calder. He did not look at the Admiral. He looked at her, and then he pointed. One arm raised, one finger extended toward the far end of the hangar, toward the personnel door that had been closed for the past 47 minutes, through which a man in a worn jacket had walked carrying a tool bag and a blue notebook and a lunchbox note he had not yet given his daughter. "The single father you fired this morning, ma'am." The sentence landed. It did not echo. It did not need to. It simply took up all the available space in the room and stood there in it. Victoria Ashworth's hand tightened on her tablet until her knuckles went white. And somewhere in the middle of her chest, in a place she had been carefully not looking at since 6 o'clock that morning, something cracked open, not dramatically, not loudly, like a hairline fracture in a material that has been under too much pressure for too long. She had read his termination order twice. That was the detail no one knew. Before she signed it, she had read it twice, and the second time she had read it there had been something, a shape, a question she had not let herself finish forming, because Robert Calder was talking and the Admiral was 20 minutes out, and the contract was 3 hours away, and there was no room for a question she did not already know the answer to. She knew now. Standing in this hangar, with the badge on the steel desk and the code in the file, and Walt Greer's arm still faintly raised. She knew what the question had been. Marlene's diner was half a mile off the highway, the kind of place that had been there long enough to stop trying them. The coffee was always slightly too hot and then suddenly cold with no middle ground. The booths had vinyl that had cracked and been repaired and cracked again in different places. The light above the counter buzzed intermittently, which the regulars had stopped noticing and newcomers always looked up at. Daniel Marsh sat in the corner booth by the window, jacket folded on the bench beside him, the blue notebook closed on the table under his hand, his phone face down next to the sugar dispenser. A cup of coffee in front of him that he had stopped drinking 20 minutes ago and had not yet decided to order another. He had called Grace's school, told them she would be dropped off by the after-school program coordinator today instead of him. He had kept his voice even and normal because the woman on the other end of the phone had a very cheerful voice and he did not want to explain anything to a very cheerful voice right now. He had not called Grace. He was not ready to hear her voice and be anything less than honest with it. He was working on what honest looked like right now. The bell above the diner door rang, boots on tile, unhurried. Walt Greer slid into the seat across from him without asking. "You look terrible," Walt said. "I feel accurate." Walt ordered a coffee he clearly did not intend to drink, waited until the waitress was gone. Then he told Daniel what had happened, all of it. Flat and short the way Walt said everything, because Walt Greer had spent 4 decades as a test pilot and test pilots develop a profound allergy to decorative language. The Admiral. The raw file, the code, Noah saying the name, the way Victoria's head turned, the question that came out of her after, and then what Walt had done. Daniel listened without moving. When Walt finished, Daniel looked out the window for a long time. The parking lot. A gray Virginia morning doing its best impression of an ordinary day. A pickup truck pulling in. A woman in a red coat walking fast toward the entrance. A crow on a light pole doing nothing in particular. "They will try to put this on me," Daniel said. "Probably. Rogue night lead. Off-books work. Made himself a problem on the most important morning the company has had in a decade. That is already the version Calder is building," Walt said. Daniel turned the coffee cup in his hands. "Not drinking, just holding. I did not do any of that work to fight anyone, Walt. I know that. I did it because pilots were going to sit in those cockpits. I know. So I do not see what walking back in there accomplishes, except giving Calder a live target in the room." Walt was quiet for a moment. He wrapped both hands around his coffee cup. Did not drink from it, just held it the same way Daniel was holding his. Two men sitting across from each other holding cups they were not drinking from, because some conversations need something in your hands. "Here is what I know," Walt said. "You did the work is real. The record is in that notebook and you are the only person who has all of it. If you walk away right now, Calder writes the ending. He writes it tonight and he files it, and in 6 months it is the version that exists. And the next technician on the next night shift who finds something that shouldn't be there, he is going to remember what happened to you, and he is going to sign the form." Daniel looked at the table. "She read my termination order twice," Walt said. "Before she signed it." Daniel was quiet for a long moment. "So she's not as certain as she acted." Daniel turned the blue notebook a quarter turn on the table. "The way you turn something when you are deciding whether to open it. The way you handle something that has weight. Not physical weight. The other kind. The kind that comes from being the only record of the truth in a room full of people who want a different story." He thought about Grace. Not the Grace of this morning. Not the 9-year-old with one shoe in her hand. The Grace of 15 years from now. The Grace who would ask him someday, in the direct way she asked everything, what had happened at work that time. The time he mentioned once and then never mentioned again. And what he would have to say. Not what he told her, but what was actually true. He could not be the person who knew and walked away. He had tried that version of himself once before. Not here, on the ship. A different situation. A different kind of wrong. And he had spent 18 months afterward being that person, and it had not agreed with him. It had not agreed with him at all. 2 conditions, he said. Walt looked at him. Everything on record. Formal recording, not someone's phone in a pocket. Done, and Evelyn Rourke is in the room. I want independent legal. No Calder in the chain. Walt almost smiled. The Admiral already asked for her. Daniel looked at the notebook, picked up his coffee. Drank what was left, even though it was cold. Then he stood up. Evelyn Rourke arrived at Ashworth Aerospace at 9:58. She was 41 years old, and she had the kind of presence that people sometimes confused with height, because she filled a room more completely than her actual dimensions suggested. She carried one bag. She spoke to no one in the lobby. She went directly to the small conference room on the executive floor that the Admiral's aide had reserved. Set up her recorder. Confirmed it was working. And sat down to wait. She had been Ashworth Aerospace independent legal counsel for 3 years. She had reviewed contracts, arbitrated disputes, signed off on compliance filings. She had done all the ordinary things that independent legal counsel does for an aerospace manufacturer of this size. She had never been asked to be in the room for something like this. But she had spent the 90 minutes between the call and her arrival reading every document she could access. The maintenance logs, the clearance records, the internal report system, the acquisition agreement with Vale Capital Group. She had found something on page 47 of the acquisition agreement. She had read it twice, then a third time. Then she had printed it and put it in her bag and decided to wait until she understood the full shape of the room before she said anything about it. The conference room filled at 10:30. Victoria at the head of the table, still in the black coat she had worn since before dawn. Still the composed surface. But the eyes were different from the eyes in the hangar at 5:45. Something had shifted in them. Something that looked like a woman who has been given a piece of information she cannot unknow and is currently deciding what to do with it. Calder to her right, Vestan. Tie precisely knotted. The specific neatness of a man who uses his appearance as a kind of argument. Preston Vale across from him, hands folded. The patient smile of someone who has been in rooms like this before and has always walked out ahead. Admiral Swan near the window. Arms crossed, not participating, observing. Walt and Noah near the door, Noah in fresh coveralls, still pale. Still holding himself together with what appeared to be sheer determination and the memory of Daniel telling him 8 months ago that the only thing worse than making a mistake is knowing about one and doing nothing. Evelyn to Victoria's left, recorder on the table, ready, and at the far end of the table, Daniel Marsh, jacket still on, the blue notebook in front of him, the tightness around his eyes that comes from being awake for 26 hours. His hands folded on the notebook the way you fold your hands over something you are protecting. Not dramatically, just carefully. He had not looked at Calder when he walked in. He had looked at Victoria. She had looked back. It was a brief look, but it was honest. Which was more than most of what had happened in this building today. Evelyn stated the date, the time, the full name of everyone present. Her voice was measured and clear and left no ambiguity about the fact that everything said from this point forward was on record and would remain so. Victoria looked at Daniel. Mr. Marsh, I want to ask you something and I want your answer on the record. Why did you not come to me directly with your concerns? Over the past 6 months, Daniel reached into his jacket, removed a folded piece of paper, slid it across the table to her, carefully, evenly. Like a man who has been holding on to this for a long time and is glad to finally set it down somewhere it cannot be ignored. Victoria unfolded it, 21 lines, dates, tail numbers, report titles. And in the right-hand margin beside each one, a notation in the same careful, blocky handwriting from the maintenance file. Blocked at COO. Reclassified non-urgent. No response. Moved to secondary file. No response, no response, no response. 21 safety reports in 6 months, ma'am. Everyone filed through proper channels. Everyone intercepted before it reached your desk. I did not come to you directly because I was told repeatedly that going around the chain of command would be treated as insubordination. Victoria did not speak. She was reading the list, down, all 21 lines. Evelyn said quietly, I pulled these from your internal system this morning. Everyone is logged as received. Everyone was closed by the COO's office within 48 hours. None of them reached executive review. Not one. The room went quiet in a specific way. Not the quiet of nothing happening, the quiet of something landing. Victoria set the paper down. "Open the notebook, Daniel," she said. He did, and he walked her through it. One page at a time. Each aircraft had its own section. Each entry, date, time, the specific nature of the deviation, a photograph reference, an internal file number, the names of witnesses. Noah Briley, Walt Greer, whose names Victoria was hearing for the first time. Each entry ended the same way. Reported, no reply. Re-inspected on following shift. By the time he reached the section for Jet 7, Victoria's hands were flat on the table, both of them, pressing lightly against the surface as if the surface were moving. "I am not asking you to give me back my job," Daniel said. His voice had not changed in 26 hours. Still even, still patient. The voice of a man who decided a long time ago that the truth does not need to be performed. It only needs to be present. "What are you asking?" "I am asking you to look at what is in this notebook and understand what it represents." She looked at him. "What does it represent?" "What your company would have told you, if your company had been allowed to." Evelyn opened her bag. She removed 3 documents. Placed them on the table, one at a time. Slowly. In order. Because order mattered. Because the story these documents told had a sequence, and the sequence was important. First, a consulting invoice. Ashworth Aerospace as the originating party. A services firm in Delaware as the recipient. Date 6 weeks ago. Amount significant. Second, a wire transfer record. The Delaware firm as the originating party. A personal account as the recipient. The name on the account, Robert Calder. Date 3 days after the invoice. Third, a chain of emails. Between a private account registered to a name no one at this table recognized, and a private account belonging to Preston Vale's chief of staff, beginning 7 weeks ago. Detailed, specific, describing the actual condition of the 18 aircraft in the inspection row, the hydraulic irregularities, the clearance discrepancies, the faults that Daniel Marsh had been flagging for 6 months, and that the official file had been quietly rewritten to conceal. Evelyn set the third document down. "Mr. Calder has been sharing suppressed maintenance data with the buyer for nearly 2 months, in exchange for a consulting arrangement that begins the day this acquisition closes." She did not say it loudly. She did not need to. The smile on Robert Calder's face did not disappear all at once. It took approximately half a second, which was the time it took his facial muscles to receive the information that maintaining the expression was no longer useful. Then it was simply gone. Preston Vale looked at the documents. Then he looked at Victoria, the elegant patience he had worn all morning gone. In its place, the neutral, watchful expression of a man recalculating in real time. "Miss Ashworth." He kept his voice smooth, an impressive effort actually. "I think what we are looking at here is a situation that would benefit from a brief pause while your internal matters are." "Sit down, Mr. Vale." Swan's voice, not loud, not angry. The voice of a man who has had 40 years to learn that authority does not require volume. "Federal investigators are already en route. You are welcome to remain in the building. You will not be leaving the county." Vale sat down, but Evelyn was not finished. She turned to one more page in her stack of documents. Page 47 of the acquisition agreement between Ashworth Aerospace and Vale Capital Group. "There is a clause here," she said, between 2 standard indemnity paragraphs. "It grants the buyer the right to reduce the purchase price and assume operational control if any maintenance record is found to be materially inconsistent with actual aircraft condition within 6 months of closing." She looked up. On its surface, this reads as buyer protection. Standard language. The kind of thing that gets initialed on page 47 without being read carefully. But given what we now know, Mr. Vale was informed of the actual condition of these aircraft 7 weeks ago. By Mr. Calder, he did not disclose this. Instead, he had this clause drafted into the agreement, which means he was not buying this company in good faith. He was buying the right to take it at a fraction of the price the moment the hidden faults surfaced after closing, which they would have, because he already knew they were there. The room was very still. Noah Briley had both hands pressed flat on his thighs and was staring at the middle of the table. Walt Greer uncrossed his arms. Victoria Ashworth looked at Preston Vale for a long moment. Then she looked at Robert Calder. Then she looked at Daniel Marsh at the far end of the table. He was watching her, not with triumph, not with anger, not with the expression of a person waiting to be vindicated. He was just watching. The same patient attention he gave to aircraft that were trying to tell him something. The same willingness to simply be present with the truth without trying to shape it. She thought about what he had said at 5:45 this morning, in this same building, before she had let Calder's voice fill the space where her own judgment should have been. Sometimes one mechanic is the last thing standing between a signed contract and a folded flag. She had heard it. She had heard it and she had let it go because the Admiral was 20 minutes out, and the contract was 3 hours away and there was no room. There was no room. She had told herself that the room was full. Victoria Ashworth stood up. She walked to the window wall, looked down through the glass at the hangar floor below. 18 jets still in their bays, small from up here, patient, waiting for someone to decide what they meant. The steel desk in the corner, the amber lamp still on, the badge on the surface, still face up. From up here she could just make out the shape of it. She stood there for a moment, just stood there. Then she turned back to the room. "Mr. Marsh," she said it quietly. "The way you say something when you are not sure your voice will hold, and you are going to say it anyway. This company owes you more than I know how to account for right now." Daniel looked at her. "Then let's start with the 18 aircraft, ma'am. Everything else can come after." She nodded, and they started with the 18 aircraft. They started with the 18 aircraft, exactly the way Daniel asked, and nobody argued them. Nobody suggested a different order or a more efficient sequence or a way to handle the legal situation first and the aircraft second, because Admiral Harold Swan had already made his position clear without stating it in those words. The aircraft came first. The aircraft had always been the point. Everything else was paperwork. Swan walked the row again. This time Daniel walked beside him, not behind, not following at a respectful distance, beside them. Because Swan had asked him to walk beside him. And when a 4-star admiral asks you to walk beside him through a row of naval training jets, you walk beside him. They moved at the same pace, which was slow, which was correct. The pace of two people who have learned in different decades on different ships on the same ocean that the thing you are looking for is never the thing you expect to find. And if you walk too fast, you will walk right past it. Swan would stop. Daniel would stop. Swan would look. Daniel would open the notebook. They did not explain themselves to the room. They did not narrate. They simply moved through the work the way work is supposed to be moved through. With attention, with patience, without performance. Noah Briley stood near the first jet and watched them. He had his hands in his coverall pockets. He was doing the thing he had been doing since 6 that morning, which was trying to figure out what kind of person he was. Not in a grand philosophical sense, in a very specific and uncomfortable sense. The kind that has a clear answer you keep circling around because the answer is not flattering. He had known, not everything, not the emails, not the Delaware company, not page 47 of an acquisition agreement he had never read, but he had known that Daniel's reports were disappearing. He had watched it happen 5 times. He had filed 2 concerns of his own through the official channel and received no response and had decided quietly, privately, in the specific way you make decisions you do not want to examine too closely, that the channel did not work and the safest thing was to keep his head down. He had been wrong about what safety meant. That was what he was working through, standing near the first jet, watching Daniel walk beside the Admiral like a man who had never once made the calculation Noah had made. Walt Greer leaned against the far wall with his arms loose at his sides, watching the same thing Noah was watching, thinking something different. 38 years in aviation. He had seen good mechanics and bad mechanics and everything in between them. He had seen men with twice Daniel's technical knowledge do half the work because they had learned to match their effort to what the system rewarded. Daniel had never learned that. Walt was not sure if that was strength or stubbornness or some combination of both that had no clean name. He decided it did not matter. The result was the same either way. By 11:45, 2 aircraft had been formally pulled. Jet 7, and Jet 11. Full teardown ordered on both. The auditor entered the holds into the official record with the original note numbers from Daniel's blue notebook listed as the source documentation, which meant that in the permanent federal record of this inspection, a cloth-bound notebook purchased at a drugstore would be cited as the document that saved 2 aircraft from flight. Daniel stood near the tail of Jet 11 when the hold was confirmed. He put one hand in his jacket pocket, not for anything specific, just the habit of it. His fingers found the edge of Claire's knitted scarf folded in the inside pocket, the uneven stitches, the place near one end where she had dropped a stitch and not gone back to fix it because she had been learning. And learning means not getting everything right the first time. He left his hand there for a moment. Just a moment. Swan came to stand beside him. "She did good work," Swan said. He was looking at the jet, not at Daniel. "Daniel looked at the Admiral, sir. Whoever prepared these aircraft, Swan kept his eyes on the fuselage. This is the work of someone who understood that the people flying these jets were trusting a stranger with their lives. That kind of understanding does not come from a manual. He turned. Where did you learn to listen like that? Daniel thought about Raymond Bowen, about the deck of USS Harrington and the steam and the noise, and one sentence said once that had never left him. From someone who knew it mattered, he said. Swan nodded. That is always how, he said, and went back out to the work. Evelyn Rourke had not left the building. While Swan and Daniel walked the row, she was in the small office off the main corridor. On the phone, 3 calls in 90 minutes. Her voice through the half-open door was the voice of someone who knew exactly what each word cost and had no interest in spending extra. When she came back into the conference room at noon, she sat down and wrote 3 things on a notepad, slid it to Victoria, said nothing out loud. Victoria read the notepad, did not react visibly, folded it once, put her hand flat on top of it. Robert Calder was walked out of the building at 12:14, not dramatically, not with the kind of scene that gets described in detail afterward and becomes the part people remember. Just 2 federal agents and 1 member of Evelyn's team, through the executive entrance, into the second-floor conference room, where Calder had been waiting for 90 minutes with the particular stillness of a man who has not yet selected his next position. He left through the side exit, the same one Daniel had used at 6 that morning. Just a door, just a way out. But the symmetry of it sat in the room after he was gone, and nobody acknowledged it and everybody felt it. Preston Vale left at 12:17. His car was waiting. It did not go to the airport. Vale sat in the back with his hands folded and looked out the window at Virginia in November. Gray sky, bare trees, the landscape of a state doing nothing to make you feel better about your situation. He had been so certain. The certainty was the thing. The way it had felt from the inside, not like arrogance but like preparation, like clarity, like simply understanding how acquisition works and positioning accordingly. He had understood the mechanics, he had seen the gap. He had moved into it. He had not accounted for a man keeping his own records in a cloth notebook that nobody required him to keep. That was the variable he had not modeled. He thought about that for a long time as the car moved through the streets of Hampton Roads and did not take him where he was supposed to go. The inspection was formally suspended at 12:30, restarted from the beginning at 1:15. The second inspection was different, not faster, not more efficient, actually slower in places, because people were doing the work differently, not performing the checks, doing them. The difference between those 2 things is not visible from the outside and is everything from the inside. Noah worked through Jet 4 with a care he had not brought to anything since the first week he started at Ashworth Aerospace, when everything was new and he was still afraid of missing something, and that fear made him move carefully. Before he learned that the system expected a certain pace and he adjusted to the system, and the carefulness got smoothed away. He found something on a fitting near the undercarriage. Not wrong enough to fail a standard check, off by half a degree. The kind of thing you would miss at normal speed. The kind of thing you feel when you slow down enough to feel it. He wrote it in his notebook, his own notebook, not Daniel's, his. Smaller, with a blue cover that was slightly different from Daniel's dark one. He had started it the morning after the conference room meeting, sitting at his kitchen table before his shift, writing the first entry in handwriting that was less steady than he would have liked, because he was writing before he could decide not to. The entry said, I knew some of it, not all, but some, and I chose not to speak. Starting now I choose differently. He had not shown it to anyone. It was not for anyone else. He finished the notation on the fitting, closed the notebook, put it in his chest pocket, and went to find a licensed inspector. Not a manager, an inspector, because that was the rule now, the new rule, the one written in plain language and signed by the chief executive and already posted in 3 locations on the hangar floor, because rules matter most the first time you follow them when no one is watching. Victoria Ashworth spent those 2 hours walking the floor, not the executive tour, not the prepared route with the department heads and the safety officer and the talking points printed on a card. The other kind, the kind where you just walk, where you stop when something catches your attention and you stay until you understand what you are looking at. She talked to a woman named Sandra Okafor who had been on day shift for 9 years. Sandra described 3 instances in the past 18 months where she had filed a concern through the official channel and received no response. She described the process the way you describe something that stopped surprising you a long time ago. Matter of fact, slightly tired. The way you talk about weather in a place that only has one kind. Victoria did not say anything reassuring. Did not say we are going to change that or I hear you or thank you for sharing this. She just listened, the whole answer. Then asked another question, and listened to that one too. She talked to a man named Gerald Pruitt who had been maintaining training aircraft for 22 years. Who told her, without being asked for his opinion, that the night shift had been quietly absorbing the day shift's missed items for at least 3 years. Not because anyone told them to. Because the alternative was letting the problem fly. He said it without accusation, which was somehow harder to hear than if he had said it with accusation. She stood in the bay beside Jet 7 for a while. She thought about putting her hand on the fuselage, decided not to, because she did not have what Daniel had, what Swan had. The years of listening that made the gesture mean something. She would just be imitating a posture she had watched 2 people take. And imitation was not the same as the thing itself, and she had spent enough of this day confusing the two. Instead, she just stood beside it, and thought about the fact that at 10:30 the previous night, a man on his own time with his own notebook had stood here and heard something that wasn't right, and had written it down, and had carried that piece of paper up 2 flights of stairs to a lit office at 4 in the morning, and handed it to someone who set it face down on a desk without reading it, and had come back downstairs, and had not gone home. She stayed with that for a long time. The thing that kept snagging in her mind was not the fraud. The fraud was Calder, the fraud was Vale, the fraud was a legal matter with defined edges and people whose entire careers were devoted to addressing it. She was angry about it, but she knew what to do with it. There were processes. The thing she did not know what to do with was simpler and harder. She had been in this building for 4 years. She had walked this floor 11 times in 4 years. 11. She had counted on the drive over this morning before she knew any of this. She had been proud of the number, 11 times in 4 years. More than her predecessor who had come from finance and treated the hangar like a necessary inconvenience. 11 times in 4 years was not leadership. It was occasional tourism. She went back to her office at 3 and wrote 4 conditions on a piece of paper. They were Daniel's conditions transmitted through Evelyn. She read each one carefully, not performing careful reading, actually reading. Asking herself with each one, is this right? Not is this feasible? Not what does this cost? Is this right? Every one of them was right. She signed them. Then she sat for a moment with the pen still in her hand and wrote a 5th, not because Daniel had asked, not because Evelyn had suggested them. Because Sandra Okafor had described filing a concern and receiving no response in the voice of someone who had long ago stopped expecting otherwise. And that voice had stayed with Victoria in a way she could not put down. The 5th condition said, every employee who had remained silent because the system had taught them that speaking did not work would have the opportunity to speak. 1 dedicated session per department. No record attached, no HR presence, no documentation, just a room. And someone whose only job was to listen and not defend the company and not explain the history and not do anything except hear what was said. She wrote it in her own handwriting, signed it separately. Then she called Evelyn and told her there were 5 conditions now. Evelyn said nothing for a moment. Then that last one was yours. Yes, good, Evelyn said, and hung up. Victoria looked at the paper for a moment longer. She thought about calling Daniel, to tell him about the 5th, to give him that information in real time. She picked up the phone, set it down. He did not need to know she had done it. That was not why she had done it. And she was trying, starting today, to stop doing things for reasons that were about how they looked rather than whether they were right. The 5th condition existed because it was right. That was enough. The full staff gathered in the hangar at 6 that evening. Day shift and night shift both. Some people had come in on their day off without being asked. The floor was full in a way it was not usually full. Coveralls and work clothes, no suits, no presentations on a screen. The inspection lights were on, white and even, the kind of light that does not flatter or obscure, just shows you what is there. 16 jets in their bays, 2 in the maintenance area. Victoria stood in front of them, no notes, no podium, no prepared language. She had drafted something in her office and read it back to herself and deleted it because it sounded like a press release, like a document written by someone managing a situation rather than someone standing inside one. She started with the plainest sentence she could find. This morning I fired the person in this company most committed to keeping our pilots alive. I did it in front of you. I am correcting it in front of you. The hangar was quiet. I was told a story. I believed it because it was easier than walking this floor and asking questions myself. That is not a leadership failure. That is just failure. It is mine. I am not going to use the word leadership to make it sound like something that happened at a distance from me. She did not pause for reaction. For 4 years I have been running a company I did not actually know. I knew the contracts. I knew the margins. I knew the inspection schedule and the client relationships and the quarterly numbers. I did not know Sandra Okafor. I did not know Gerald Pruitt. I did not know a man named Daniel Marsh was spending his own time after his shift doing work the system should have been doing because he did not know how to do it differently. She looked at the people in front of her, not at the room, at the people. That changes today. Not as a policy, not as a restructuring initiative, as a fact. I'm going to be on this floor. I am going to know your names. I am going to read the reports that come through the new independent channel with my own eyes, and I am going to respond to them within 48 hours. And the response is going to be substantive, not an acknowledgement, an actual response. She stopped, started again. And for everyone in this room who stayed quiet because the system had taught you that speaking did not work, there will be a session, no record, no HR, no documentation, just a room and someone who will listen. Starting next week. Every department, you will receive the details tomorrow morning. She looked around the room one more time. That is all I have, the rest is work. And we have a lot of it. She walked off the floor. She did not know if it was enough. She suspected it was not. She suspected that trust, once systematically discouraged, does not return because someone gave a speech in a hangar at 6 in the evening. She suspected it returned slowly, in the way the tide returns, not because you asked it to, but because you stopped building walls against it. She was prepared to stop building walls. That was what she had, and she was going to show up with it every day until it became something more. Daniel picked Grace up from school at 3:15. She came out through the main doors with her backpack half-zipped and one shoelace coming undone, and an expression of someone who has been waiting to talk for 7 hours and is extremely ready to begin. She got in the truck and started talking before the door was fully closed. He let her talk, all the way home, about the math class and the thing that happened at lunch and the book she was reading about the girl who builds rockets. She was at the part where the rocket fails for the 3rd time, and she could not decide if she found this inspiring or exhausting. Both, Daniel said. She considered this. Yeah, she said. Both. He made the good pasta. The kind with the sauce from the jar that she had at some point decided was the correct pasta, and all other pastas were merely acceptable. She set the table without being asked. They ate them. She told him something that had happened in the hallway after school that was apparently extremely funny. And he laughed, and it felt strange in his chest in the way that release always feels strange when you have been holding something for a long time. When dinner was done and the dishes were in the sink, he sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea, and she came and sat across from him with the expression of a 9-year-old who has been patient long enough. So she said, "So you got fired, for a while, but not anymore." "I have a meeting tomorrow about the not anymore part." She nodded, processing, "Because you told the truth, yes. And they did not like it. Some of them did not know." She was quiet for a moment. Outside, the November dark had come down early. The kitchen was warm. The refrigerator hummed in the background. On its door, the lighthouse magnet, the drawing. "Dad, yeah, Chief Bowen said that to you about the machines." He looked at her. He had told her about Raymond Bowen once. A year ago, maybe more. A long drive. She had asked about the Navy in the particular way children ask about a parent's life before them, like they are looking for the moment the story started. He had told her about the deck of USS Harrington and the steam and the noise and one sentence said once by a man with sculptor's hands. He had not remembered telling her, she had remembered being told. "He said that too," she said. "You can hear something before it goes wrong. But only if you slow down enough to listen." "Yeah," he said that. She nodded again, satisfied. "You did that. I tried to." She looked at him with the directness that 9-year-olds have before they learn to look sideways at things. "That is the same as doing it, Dad." He looked at her for a moment. She picked up her glass, drank, put it down. Went back to thinking about rockets. He sat with what she had said. "That is the same as doing it." He put her to bed at 8:30. She was reading the rocket book. The girl was on failure number 4 and had just figured out something about thrust angles that had not occurred to her before. Grace read it out loud, the way she always read out loud when something interested her, half for him and half for herself. She fell asleep with the book on her chest. He took it, found her page, set it on the nightstand, sat on the edge of the bed for a while in the dark. Thought about Claire. Not the way he usually thought about Claire, which was in flashes, a specific sound, a specific light. The way she folded napkins into triangles without thinking about it. He thought about her the way you think about someone when something has happened that they should have been there to see. She would have had something to say about today. Not comfort, necessarily. Claire was not always comfort. Sometimes she was the other thing. The thing that looked at you steadily and said, "You know what this means now." You know what you have to do with it. He reached into the pocket of his jacket hanging on the chair by the door, found the scarf, held it for a while in the dark, the uneven stitches, the dropped stitch near one end she had not gone back to fix. He had told her about it once gently because he thought she would want to know. She had said, "I know, I left it because it's true." Things made by human hands should look like they were made by human hands. He put it back, went downstairs, sat at the kitchen table with the blue notebook in front of him and did not open it. Just put his hand on the cover. The cloth worn soft from 2 years of being handled in the dark, from being opened at 2 in the morning and 3 and 4, from being carried in a jacket pocket across a carrier deck and a hangar floor and a parking lot and a diner booth and a conference room table. From holding the truth when no other record was willing to hold it. He sat there for a long time. The spring came slowly, March gray, April uncertain, and then one morning in May the Virginia light came back all at once the way it does, low and gold and arriving everywhere at the same time. Daniel Marsh had been director of Naval Flight Safety Operations for 6 weeks. The title was on a new badge, clean white face, silver edge, his name in block letters. He wore it clipped to the same jacket, the same worn one with the bleach spot and the faded elbows and the inside pocket that held a cloth scarf with an uneven stitch near one end. He had been offered a new jacket. He had kept the old one. The morning of the first full test flight under the new safety protocol was a Tuesday in May, the kind of morning that does not announce itself, just shows up and turns out to be the day you were working toward. The hangar was right, not performing right, actually right. The difference lives in the pace of it. In the way people moved through their checks, unhurried, present, checking because the check mattered, not because a clock or a contract was watching. Noah Briley was working on Jet 3, 5 months of the new protocol, 5 months of writing in his own notebook. The entries had gotten more precise over time. Not because someone had taught him to write them differently, because precision had become a habit. Because he had learned that writing a thing down carefully is a form of taking it seriously. And taking it seriously was the only way to do the work right. He found nothing wrong with Jet 3 that morning. He wrote that down too, all clear, 612 NB. Because the clear days mattered as much as the other kind. Because the record was only useful if it was complete. Sandra Okafor had attended 3 of the listening sessions. She had spoken at the first one for 11 minutes. She had not planned to speak for 11 minutes. She had planned to say the 2 things she had been carrying around for 18 months and then sit back down. But once she started, she found there were more than 2 things. There were more than she had realized she was carrying. The person in the room had listened, had not defended, had not explained them, had not suggested that she might be misremembering or that there was context she did not have, had just listened them. Sandra had gone home afterward and cried for about 15 minutes and then felt, for the first time in a long time at this job, like a person whose experience of the place she worked was considered true. She had come back for the 2nd session, and the 3rd. Gerald Pruitt had not attended any of the sessions. He did not feel he had anything to say that the events of November had not already said more clearly than he could them. But he had started greeting Victoria by name when she came onto the floor, which he had not done before. And she had started stopping to ask him what he was working on and staying to hear the actual answer. It was a small thing. It was not a small thing. Victoria was in the hangar at 6:58, work jacket, the plain navy one with the logo. She had worn it every day for 6 weeks. It had stopped feeling like a costume and started feeling like a jacket. She was holding something in her palm, a badge. She crossed the floor to where Daniel was standing near the lead aircraft. He looked at what she was holding. Then he took it, unclipped his temporary director's badge, set it in her hand, clipped the new one to the jacket loop, looked at it for a moment, then reached into his inside pocket, past the scarf, and took out the old badge, the one from November. The one that had lain on a steel desk from 6 in the morning through the night and into the next day when he had asked for it back. He had carried it in the same pocket as the scarf since then, not on display, not framed on a wall, just present, with the things he carried because they were true. He clipped it beside the new one, 2 badges on the same jacket loop. Victoria looked at them, the old one with the scratch along the bottom edge from the desk. His name in letters slightly more faded than the new one. "Why do you keep it?" He didn't answer right away. He looked past her to the safety fence at the edge of the tarmac. Grace was there, 9 years old, backpack on because she was going to school after. Lunchbox in one hand and in both arms held up so he could see it from the flight line, the drawing from the refrigerator, folded once. The crayon wings catching the morning light through the paper. The blue sky that did not exist in actual aviation but was exactly true anyway. He looked at the row of jets, then at Victoria. To remember, he said, that a company loses its way the moment it stops listening to the people who hear the engines first. Victoria did not answer. There was nothing to add. The lead aircraft began to move. The engines came up slowly. The sound built from almost nothing into something that filled the hangar and rolled out across the tarmac and climbed into the May morning. Even. Clean. The exact tone those engines were supposed to make. Daniel had heard that tone at 10:30 on a November night when it was wrong. He heard it now when it was right. The jet rolled onto the runway, gathered itself, lifted, the second followed the third, one by one down the row, 16 aircraft rising into a sky the color of something beginning. Behind the safety fence, Grace raised the drawing higher. Both arms up, as high as she could reach, he reached into his inside pocket, not for the notebook, not for the badge, for the scarf. He held it in one closed hand at his side. Claire's uneven stitches against his palm. The dropped stitch near the end that she had left because things made by human hands should look like what they are. He stood there and watched the last jet climb, watched it until it was a shape, then a point. Then nothing but the sound of it still moving through the air above Hampton Roads on a Tuesday morning in May. Clean, steady, true.